Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the long hallway of Naval Base, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished floor. At 23, she had been working as a janitor for the base for nearly 2 years, ever since her husband deployed overseas with the Marines. The job paid decent money and kept her busy while she waited for his return. The early morning shift was her favorite. The base was quiet, most personnel either still sleeping or already out on training exercises. She could work in peace, listening to music through her earbuds while she cleaned. Today felt different, though. There was an energy in the air, a tension she couldn't quite place. As she approached the SEAL barracks, Maria noticed more activity than usual. Several men in camouflage uniforms were gathered outside, their voices low but serious. She had cleaned these barracks many times before, but the elite Navy SEALs always made her nervous. They were legends on the base, spoken about in hushed tones by other personnel. Maria knocked softly on the door before entering. "Housekeeping," she called out in her accented English. Her family had immigrated from El Salvador when she was 15, and while her English had improved dramatically over the years, she still felt self-conscious about her accent around the military personnel. The barracks were empty, beds already made with military precision. She smiled slightly, remembering how her husband used to bounce quarters off their bed at home, teaching her the proper way to make military corners. These SEALs clearly took their standards seriously. She began her routine, starting with the bathroom facilities. The industrial-strength cleaner she used had a sharp chemical smell that always made her eyes water slightly. As she scrubbed the shower stalls, she heard heavy footsteps in the main room. "Ma'am, you need to step out for a moment," a deep voice said behind her. Maria turned to see a tall man in his early 30s, his dark hair cut in the regulation military style. His uniform bore the insignia of a petty officer first class, and there was something about his bearing that immediately commanded respect. His eyes were a piercing blue, and when he looked at her, she felt like he was seeing everything about her in an instant. "I'm sorry, sir. I can come back later," Maria said, starting to gather her cleaning supplies. "No need to apologize. I'm Petty Officer Jake. We just need to conduct a brief inspection before you continue. Standard procedure when we're preparing for deployment." Maria nodded, stepping back to give him space. She had heard about these inspections but had never witnessed one. Jake began examining every surface with methodical precision, running his finger along windowsills, checking corners for dust, inspecting the floors for any imperfections. What surprised Maria was how thorough he was. This wasn't just a cursory glance. He was examining her work with the same intensity she imagined he brought to his military operations. After several minutes, he turned to her with an expression she couldn't read. "How long have you been cleaning these barracks?" Jake asked. "Almost 2 years, sir," Maria replied, wondering if she had done something wrong. "And you do this every morning?" "Yes, sir, Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. sharp." Jake nodded slowly, continuing his inspection. He opened each locker, checked the condition of the mattresses, even examined the light fixtures. Maria watched nervously, wringing the cleaning cloth in her hands. "Your husband is deployed?" Jake asked suddenly. Maria was startled by the personal question. "Yes, sir. Staff Sergeant Santos, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. He's been in Afghanistan for 7 months now." "Good unit. Heard they're doing important work over there." Jake's voice softened slightly. "That must be difficult for you." "I stay busy," Maria said simply. She didn't like to talk about how lonely she got, how she sometimes cried herself to sleep worrying about Carlos's safety. Jake finished his inspection and turned to face her directly. "Your work here is excellent, Mrs. Santos. Best I've seen in my 8 years on this base." Maria felt a flush of pride but also confusion. "Thank you, sir, but I just clean. It's not complicated." "Actually, it is complicated," Jake said, his expression serious. "What you do requires attention to detail, consistency, and pride in your work. Those are the same qualities we look for in SEALs." Maria didn't know how to respond to that. She had never thought of cleaning as requiring special skills. It was just something that needed to be done. "Tell me something, Mrs. Santos. When you clean a room, what do you think about?" The question caught her off guard. "I think about doing it right, sir. My grandmother always said that any job worth doing is worth doing well." "What else?" Maria hesitated, not sure why this Navy SEAL was so interested in her cleaning routine. "I think about the people who will use the space." Like when I clean these barracks, I think about how you all work so hard and deserve to come home to a clean, comfortable place. Jake's expression changed subtly. There was something like respect in his eyes now. You think about the mission, about how your work affects others. I guess so, sir. Mrs. Santos, can I ask you something that might sound strange? Maria nodded, though her nervousness was increasing. Would you be willing to show me how you clean? I mean really show me. Every step, every technique you use. Maria stared at him in disbelief. Sir, you want me to teach you how to clean? That's exactly what I want. But you're a Navy SEAL. You protect our country. I just push a mop around. Jake's expression became more serious. Mrs. Santos, in 2 weeks, my team is deploying to a forward operating base in Afghanistan. We'll be living in conditions where cleanliness isn't just about comfort. It's about health, morale, and mission readiness. The difference between a properly maintained facility and a poorly maintained one can literally be life or death. Maria felt the weight of his words. She had never thought about her work in those terms before. The military teaches us to clean, but they teach us like soldiers. You clean like someone who cares. There's a difference. I don't understand, sir. Soldiers clean because they have to. You clean because you want to do it right. That's what I want to learn. Maria looked around the barracks, seeing her work through new eyes. Every surface she had touched, every corner she had carefully cleaned, suddenly seemed more important. You really want me to show you? She asked. Yes, ma'am, if you're willing. Maria took a deep breath. Okay, sir, but I have to warn you I'm very particular about how I do things. Jake smiled for the first time since she had met him. Mrs. Santos, particular is exactly what we need. She walked over to her cart and began organizing her supplies. First thing you need to understand, sir, is that you can't clean properly if your tools aren't organized. Everything has its place, and everything needs to be in its place. Jake watched intently as she arranged her cleaning bottles, rags, and brushes with military precision. Maria didn't realize it, but her organizational system was more sophisticated than most supply sergeants he had worked with. Why do you arrange them this way? Jake asked. Efficiency, sir. When I'm working, I don't want to waste time looking for the right tool. Also, I can tell at a glance if anything is missing or running low. She handed him a spray bottle filled with her preferred all-purpose cleaner. This is for general surfaces, not too much, not too little. People think more cleaning solution means cleaner, but that's wrong. Too much leaves residue. Jake took the bottle, examining the label. It wasn't the standard military-issue cleaner he was familiar with. I buy this with my own money, Maria explained. The base supplies work fine, but this one is better for certain jobs. My husband always says that the right tool makes any job easier. Smart man, Jake said. Maria began demonstrating her technique on one of the windows. Start from the top, work your way down. Gravity is your friend if you use it right, your enemy if you don't. Jake watched her smooth, efficient movements. There was no wasted motion, no areas missed. It was like watching a professional athlete, he realized. Every movement had purpose. The key is pattern and pressure, Maria continued. Same pattern every time, same pressure every time. That way you know every surface has been treated the same. She moved to the sink next. People think sinks are the hardest to clean because they get the dirtiest, but actually they're the easiest if you understand water flow. Jake found himself taking mental notes as Maria demonstrated how to clean the faucet fixtures, how to reach every corner of the basin, how to make the stainless steel shine without leaving water spots. Mrs. Santos, can I ask how you learned all this? My grandmother ran a cleaning business in San Salvador. She used to say that cleaning was about respect. Respect for the space, respect for the people who use it, and respect for yourself. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She was, sir. She also said that you can tell everything about a person by how they treat things that aren't theirs. Jake paused at that comment. In all his years of military service, he had never heard anyone articulate the connection between character and cleanliness so clearly. Show me the floors, he said. Maria wheeled her cart to the center of the room. Floors are about system and timing. You have to work in sections, and you have to know how long each section takes to dry. She began mopping with the same methodical precision she had shown with everything else. Jake noticed that she never stepped on areas she had already cleaned, never had to redo sections, never left streaks or puddles. The mop is like a paintbrush, sir. If you just slap it around, you get a mess. If you use it with technique, you get art. Art? Jake asked. My grandmother used to say that. She said there was no difference between cleaning a floor and painting a picture. Both required skill, patience, and pride. As Maria worked, Jake began to understand what she meant. There was something almost meditative about watching her clean. Every movement was deliberate, purposeful, graceful, even. Mrs. Santos, what do you think makes someone good at this work? Maria paused, leaning on her mop handle as she considered the question. Attention to details that other people don't see, sir. Consistency even when no one is watching. And understanding that your work matters even if other people don't think it does. Jake felt something click in his mind. Those were the exact qualities that made the difference between an average soldier and an elite operator. He had just never thought about them in this context before. Can I try? He asked. Maria looked surprised but handed him the mop. Remember, sir, even pressure, overlapping strokes, work with the grain of the floor, not against it. Jake began mopping, trying to replicate her technique. Within minutes, he realized how much skill was actually involved. His strokes were uneven, he left streaks, and he nearly stepped on a section he had just cleaned. This is harder than it looks, he admitted. Everything is harder than it looks when you do it right, sir. Jake continued practicing under Maria's patient guidance. She corrected his grip, showed him how to control the amount of water on the mop, taught him to read the floor surface to determine the best approach for each area. After 30 minutes, Jake was beginning to get the hang of it. His technique was still rough compared to Maria's, but he was starting to understand the principles involved. Better, sir, but you're thinking too much. Trust your hands, trust the process. Jake tried to relax into the movement. To his surprise, he found it almost calming. The repetitive motion, the visible progress, the satisfaction of seeing each section transform from dirty to clean. I think I'm beginning to understand, he said. Understanding is the first step, sir. Mastery takes time. How long did it take you to get this good? I'm still learning, sir. Every day I find something new, some way to improve. That's what keeps it interesting. Jake stopped mopping and looked at Maria with new respect. Mrs. Santos, I owe you an apology. For what, sir? I've walked through this barracks hundreds of times, enjoying the cleanliness, the order, the sense of peace, and I never really thought about the skill and dedication required to create that environment. Maria felt herself blushing. It's just my job, sir. No, it's not. It's your craft, and you're an artist. The sound of boots in the hallway interrupted their conversation. Jake straightened up as 3 other SEALs entered the barracks. What the hell are you doing? Asked a stocky man with sergeant stripes. Learning, Sergeant. Mrs. Santos has been teaching me proper facility maintenance techniques. The 3 men looked at Maria with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. She suddenly felt very self-conscious standing there with her cleaning cart while 4 Navy SEALs stared at her. Ma'am, said the sergeant, nodding respectfully to Maria before turning back to Jake. We need to talk about the pre-deployment briefing. Give me 5 minutes, Jake said. As the other SEALs stepped outside, Jake turned back to Maria. Mrs. Santos, would you be willing to teach my entire team what you've been showing me? Sir, I don't think your team wants to learn cleaning from a janitor. My team wants to learn anything that will help us succeed and come home safe. What you know could make a real difference for us downrange. Maria thought about Carlos, somewhere in Afghanistan, living in conditions she could barely imagine. If she could help other soldiers, other husbands and fathers, do their job better and stay safer, how could she say no? When do you want to start, sir? Tomorrow morning if you're available. Same time, same place. I'll be here, sir. Jake, he said. If you're going to be our instructor, you can call me Jake. Maria smiled shyly. Okay, Jake, but you have to promise me something. What's that? You have to promise you'll really try. Not just go through the motions because you feel sorry for the janitor lady. Jake's expression became serious. Mrs. Santos, I give you my word as a Navy SEAL. I will give this the same effort and attention I give everything else that might save lives. Good, Maria said, beginning to pack up her supplies, because I don't accept anything less than your best effort. As Jake watched her efficiently organize her cart and prepare to move to the next building, He realized that this unassuming woman had just challenged him in a way few people ever had. She had looked at him, a decorated Navy SEAL, and essentially told him that if he wanted to learn from her, he would have to earn it. "Mrs. Santos," he called as she reached the door. "Yes, sir." "Thank you for agreeing to teach us, and for opening my eyes to something I should have seen a long time ago." "Thank you, Jake, for asking. Most people don't think what I do is worth learning. Most people don't understand what it takes to be excellent at anything." After Maria left, Jake stood in the spotless barracks, seeing it with completely new eyes. Every gleaming surface, every perfectly arranged item, every subtle detail that contributed to the sense of order and calm, represented hours of skilled work by someone who took pride in doing things right. He thought about the forward operating base where he would be deployed in 2 weeks. The harsh conditions, the constant stress, the challenge of maintaining morale and health in an environment that seemed designed to break down both. Suddenly, the idea of bringing some of Maria's expertise to that situation didn't seem strange at all. It seemed essential. Jake pulled out his phone and called his commanding officer. "Sir, I need to add something to tomorrow's training schedule." As he explained his request, Jake found himself using words he had never applied to cleaning before. Tactical advantage, force multiplier, mission critical. By the end of the conversation, his co was not only supportive, but intrigued enough to want to observe the training himself. That evening, Jake found himself researching facility maintenance techniques online, reading about the connection between environmental conditions and military performance, studying the role of logistics and support personnel in combat operations. What he discovered reinforced his instinct that Maria had something valuable to teach. He also found himself thinking about Maria's comment about respect. Respect for the space, respect for the people who use it, respect for yourself. In all his military training, he had learned about respect for the mission, respect for the chain of command, respect for his brothers in arms. But he had never considered how respect applied to the seemingly mundane aspects of daily life. As he lay in his bunk that night, Jake stared at the ceiling that Maria had dusted that morning. Tomorrow would begin an unusual chapter in his military career, one where he would be the student and a civilian janitor would be his instructor. The irony wasn't lost on him, but more than that, he was genuinely excited to learn. In her small apartment off base, Maria was having trouble sleeping as well. She kept thinking about Jake's words, about how he had connected her work to his mission, about how he had asked her to teach him something she had never thought anyone would want to learn. She thought about Carlos, about all the soldiers she had never met who were living in difficult conditions far from home. If what she knew could somehow help them, if her grandmother's teachings about respect and attention to detail could serve a larger purpose, then perhaps her work was more important than she had ever realized. Maria spent an hour that night planning what she would teach Jake and his team. She thought about which techniques would be most useful in a military environment, which principles would transfer most effectively to their situation. She even wrote out a list of supplies they might want to requisition, based on her experience with what worked best in different conditions. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Maria smiled at the thought of teaching Navy SEALs how to clean. It wasn't what she had expected when she started her shift that morning, but life had a way of surprising you. Sometimes the most unlikely connections led to the most meaningful moments. Maria arrived at the base 30 minutes earlier than usual the next morning, her stomach fluttering with nervous energy. She had spent most of the previous evening preparing for what she was starting to think of as the strangest teaching assignment of her life. Her cleaning cart was more organized than ever, and she had brought additional supplies that she thought might be useful for demonstration purposes. As she approached the SEAL barracks, she was surprised to see not just Jake waiting for her, but 5 other men in military uniforms. They were standing in a loose formation, talking quietly among themselves. When they saw her coming, their conversation stopped, and all eyes turned to her. "Good morning, Mrs. Santos," Jake said, stepping forward. "Thank you for agreeing to do this." "Good morning, Jake," Maria replied, proud that her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Jake gestured to the other men. "Let me introduce my team. This is Sergeant, my second in command." Sergeant was the stocky man from the previous day. He stepped forward with a polite but skeptical expression. "Ma'am, I appreciate you taking time to work with us." "This is Petty Officer Williams, our communications specialist," Jake continued, indicating a tall, lean African-American man who nodded respectfully. "Petty Officer Armetic," Jake said, pointing to a compact Asian-American man with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "And Petty Officer Jackson, our explosives expert," he finished, nodding toward a muscular man with sandy brown hair and an easy smile. Maria said, feeling intimidated but trying not to show it. These were some of the most elite soldiers in the world, and they were looking to her for instruction. "Mrs. Santos," Jake said, "before we begin, I want to make sure everyone understands why we're here. In 2 weeks, we deploy to Afghanistan. We'll be operating out of a forward base where conditions are challenging at best. The difference between a well-maintained facility and a poorly maintained one could impact everything from our health to our mission effectiveness." Sergeant shifted slightly. "Sir, with respect, we all know how to clean. It's not exactly advanced training." Jake looked at his sergeant steadily. "Yesterday, I spent an hour watching Mrs. Santos work and then tried to replicate what she was doing. I learned more about attention to detail and systematic thinking in that hour than I have in months of standard facility maintenance. I'm asking you to keep an open mind." Williams spoke up. "Ma'am, what exactly are we going to be learning that we don't already know?" Maria took a deep breath. This was her moment to either establish credibility or lose the respect of the group before she even started. "May I ask you something first?" "Of course," Jake said. "When you clean your equipment, your weapons, your gear, how do you approach it?" "Thoroughly," said immediately. "Our lives depend on our equipment functioning perfectly." "Exactly," Maria said, feeling more confident. "And why do you clean your equipment that way?" "Because we understand that every detail matters," Jackson said. "A speck of sand in the wrong place can jam a weapon. A poorly maintained radio can fail when you need it most." "That's right," Maria said. "You treat your equipment with that level of care because you understand the consequences of not doing so. What I want to teach you is to apply that same mindset to your living environment." Looked skeptical. "Ma'am, no disrespect, but our barracks aren't going to jam like a rifle." "No, Sergeant, but they can impact your health, your morale, your sleep quality, and your ability to focus on your mission. Let me ask you this, when was the last time you got sick?" "I don't get sick," said immediately. "None of you get sick very often, I imagine. You're all in excellent physical condition, you eat well, you take care of yourselves. But in a forward operating base, you'll be under stress, eating different food, dealing with different climate conditions, and possibly exposed to pathogens your bodies aren't used to. In that environment, the cleanliness of your living space becomes critical." The men exchanged glances. Maria could see she was starting to get their attention. "Also," she continued, "when you're in a high-stress environment for months at a time, your psychological well-being becomes just as important as your physical health. A clean, well-organized living space provides a sense of control and calm that can be crucial for maintaining mental clarity." Jake nodded approvingly. "Mrs. Santos, show them what you showed me yesterday." Maria wheeled her cart into the barracks, and the 6 men followed her. She immediately felt the difference in atmosphere. Yesterday, it had been just her and Jake, one-on-one instruction. Today, she had an audience of elite soldiers who were probably wondering why they were taking cleaning lessons from a janitor. "First thing," Maria said, deciding to dive right in. "Everyone thinks cleaning is about removing dirt. That's only part of it. Real cleaning is about creating and maintaining systems that prevent problems before they occur." She began organizing her supplies on a nearby table. "Sergeant, you mentioned that you know how to clean. Can you show me how you would clean this window?" Stepped forward, clearly eager to prove that this exercise was unnecessary. He took a paper towel from Maria's cart and sprayed window cleaner directly onto the glass. "Not bad," Maria said diplomatically as worked. "You're removing the dirt and you're being thorough, but can I show you a few adjustments that might improve your results?" Stepped back and Maria took his place at the window. "First, the spray pattern. You sprayed directly onto the glass, but that creates uneven coverage and can leave spots where the cleaner is too concentrated." She demonstrated her technique, spraying the cleaner onto her cloth first, then applying it to the window in overlapping strokes. "See how this gives me complete control over how much cleaner goes where." Next, she showed them her systematic approach to wiping the glass. Top to bottom, overlapping strokes, consistent pressure. When you work randomly, you miss spots. When you work systematically, you can be confident that every inch has been properly treated. Williams leaned forward. Ma'am, that makes sense for Windows, but how does this apply to our deployment situation? Good question, Maria said. In a forward operating base, you might not have glass windows, but you'll have equipment displays, optical devices, vehicle windshields. The principle is the same. Clean optics can be the difference between seeing a threat and missing it. Nodded thoughtfully. She's right. We've had missions compromised because someone didn't properly maintain their scope. Show us more, Jake said. Maria moved to the sink area. Bathroom facilities in a forward base are often primitive, but they're also where bacteria and illness spread most easily. Let me show you how to clean these areas not just for appearance, but for health. She began demonstrating her technique for cleaning faucets, explaining how bacteria collected in certain areas, how to ensure that cleaning solutions reached every surface, how to verify that the cleaning had been effective. The goal isn't just to remove visible dirt, she explained. It's to eliminate pathogens that you can't see but that can make you sick. As she worked, Maria began to relax. The men were paying attention now, asking intelligent questions, making connections between her techniques and their operational needs. They weren't just humoring her anymore, they were genuinely learning. Mrs. Santos said, "In my medical training, we learned about infection control, but this is more detailed than anything I've seen for field conditions." Thank you, Maria said. My grandmother used to clean medical facilities in El Salvador. She taught me that when people's health is at stake, there's no such thing as being too careful. What about floor maintenance? Jackson asked. Our base will probably have concrete floors, maybe some kind of temporary flooring. Maria smiled. This was one of her favorite topics. Floors are the foundation of everything else. If your floors aren't properly maintained, nothing else you do matters much. She began demonstrating mopping technique, explaining the importance of working in sections, controlling moisture levels, and ensuring that each area dried properly. Wet floors breed bacteria and create slip hazards. Dirty floors spread contamination, but properly maintained floors actually help keep everything else clean. Tried the technique himself under Maria's guidance. After a few minutes, he stopped and looked at his work critically. I can see the difference, he admitted. My way works, but this way works better. That's all I'm trying to show you, Maria said. There's usually a difference between doing something adequately and doing it as well as possible. In your line of work, I imagine that difference can be important. It can mean the difference between mission success and mission failure, Jake said quietly. For the next hour, Maria walked the team through various cleaning and maintenance techniques. She showed them how to properly organize cleaning supplies for maximum efficiency, how to inspect their work to ensure quality, how to maintain equipment so that it lasted longer and worked better. What impressed the SEALs most was Maria's systematic approach to everything. She had clearly thought through every aspect of her work, developing efficient processes that minimized wasted time and maximized results. Mrs. Santos, Williams said, this is like tactical doctrine but for cleaning. I never thought of it that way, Maria said, but I suppose that's right. My grandmother always said that good work required good planning. Can you teach us how to set up a cleaning schedule for a team? Jake asked. Of course, Maria said. The key is understanding that different tasks have different frequencies and different skill requirements. She began outlining a maintenance schedule, explaining how to rotate responsibilities so that no one person got stuck with all the unpleasant jobs, how to build in quality control checks, how to adjust the schedule based on changing conditions. As she talked, the SEALs took notes. Maria was amazed to see these elite warriors writing down her advice about mop selection and bathroom schedules. One more thing, Maria said as the session was winding down. Everything I've shown you is technique, but technique alone isn't enough. The most important ingredient is attitude. What do you mean? Asked. You have to care about doing it right, even when no one is watching, even when it seems unimportant. My grandmother used to say that how you do anything is how you do everything. Jake nodded slowly. That's consistent with our training philosophy. Excellence in small things leads to excellence in big things. Exactly, Maria said. When you're deployed, there will be days when maintaining your living area seems pointless compared to everything else you're dealing with. Those are the days when it matters most. Why? Asked. Because that's when you need the sense of control and normalcy the most. When everything around you is chaotic, Having one space that's clean and organized can help keep you centered. The men were quiet for a moment, considering this. Finally, Williams spoke up. Ma'am, I have to admit I thought this was going to be a waste of time, but you've given us a lot to think about. Thank you, Maria said. I hope it helps you downrange. Mrs. Santos, Jake said, would you be willing to meet with us again tomorrow? I'd like you to help us develop specific protocols for our deployment situation. I'd be honored to help, Maria said. As the SEALs began to file out, approached Maria. Ma'am, I owe you an apology. I didn't take this seriously at first. No apology needed, Sergeant. It's natural to be skeptical of new approaches. Can I ask you something personal? Said. Sure. Your husband, he's deployed right now. Yes, with the Marines in Afghanistan. What's his name? Staff Sergeant Carlos Santos. Nodded thoughtfully. I've served with Marines before. Good people. He's lucky to have someone like you waiting for him. Thank you, Maria said, feeling tears threaten unexpectedly. Mrs. Santos continued, what you taught us today, it's going to help us be better soldiers. Better soldiers come home safer. So in a way, you're helping us the same way your husband is helping his country. Maria had to take a moment to compose herself before she could respond. That means more to me than you know. After the SEALs left, Maria continued with her regular cleaning routine, but everything felt different. She found herself analyzing her own techniques more critically, thinking about how to explain and improve them. She also felt a new sense of purpose in her work. These men were going to carry her teachings into harm's way, where the skills she had shared might actually make a difference in their safety and effectiveness. That afternoon, Maria received a phone call that would change everything. Her supervisor, Mrs., sounded excited on the phone. Maria, I just got a call from Lieutenant Commander Stevens. Apparently, you've been working with some of his SEALs. Yes, ma'am. They asked me to share some cleaning techniques. Well, whatever you did, it made an impression. The Lieutenant Commander wants to know if you'd be interested in developing a formal training program for pre-deployment maintenance protocols. Maria was stunned. A formal program, but I'm just a janitor. Maria, you're a janitor who apparently knows things that Navy SEALs want to learn. That makes you a valuable resource. Would you be interested? I don't know what to say. What would something like that involve? We'd have to work out the details, but it would probably mean developing curriculum, conducting training sessions, maybe even traveling to other bases to share your knowledge. Maria thought about Carlos, about Jake and his team, about all the soldiers who might benefit from what her grandmother had taught her. Mrs., if this could help our military personnel do their jobs better and stay safer, then yes, I'm very interested. Excellent. Can you meet with Lieutenant Commander Stevens tomorrow afternoon to discuss the details? Yes, ma'am. After hanging up, Maria sat in her small apartment, trying to process what was happening. 2 days ago, she had been an anonymous cleaning lady. Now, she was being asked to develop military training programs. It seemed impossible, but it was really happening. She thought about her grandmother, who had cleaned medical facilities and office buildings with the same care and attention that Maria brought to the base. Her grandmother had always believed that honest work, done well, had its own dignity and value. She had never imagined that her teachings would one day be shared with Navy SEALs. That evening, Maria called Carlos's mother to share the news. Mrs. Santos was proud but not entirely surprised. She said in Spanish, "Your grandmother always said you had her gift for seeing what others missed. She would be so proud." As Maria prepared for bed that night, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness about what lay ahead. She was about to enter a world she had never imagined being part of, working with military officers to develop training programs for elite soldiers. It was intimidating, but it was also an opportunity to make a real difference. She thought about Jake's words about respect for the space, respect for the people who use it, respect for yourself. Tomorrow, she would begin learning whether the military establishment would show respect for the knowledge of a civilian janitor who had something valuable to teach. Lieutenant Commander Stevens was nothing like what Maria had expected. Instead of the intimidating military stereotype she had imagined, he was a soft-spoken man in his mid-40s with graying temples and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His office was organized but comfortable, with family photos alongside military commendations and operational maps. "Mrs. Santos, please have a seat," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "Can I get you some coffee?" "That would be nice, thank you," Maria said, trying to calm her nerves. She had barely slept the night before, alternating between excitement about this opportunity and anxiety about whether she was qualified for it. Lieutenant Commander Stevens poured coffee from a machine in the corner of his office and handed her a mug. "First, I want to thank you for the work you've been doing with Petty Officer's team. Jake gave me a detailed briefing on yesterday's training session." "Thank you, sir. I hope it was helpful." "More than helpful. What you taught them challenges some assumptions we've been making about facility maintenance in forward-deployed positions." He sat down across from her. "Tell me, Mrs. Santos, how did you develop your expertise?" Maria told him about her grandmother, about learning to clean medical facilities in El Salvador, about the philosophy of respect and attention to detail that had guided her work. As she talked, Lieutenant Commander Stevens took notes, asking thoughtful questions about her techniques and approach. "What interests me most," he said when she finished, "is your systematic approach to training others. Most people who are good at something can't necessarily teach it effectively. But Jake tells me you were able to transfer not just techniques, but the thinking behind the techniques." "I never thought of myself as a teacher, sir. I just tried to explain why I do things the way I do them." "That's exactly what good teaching is," Stevens said. "The ability to break down complex processes into understandable components and communicate the reasoning behind each step." He pulled out a folder and opened it on his desk. "Mrs. Santos, I'd like to discuss a proposition with you. We're developing what we call enhanced pre-deployment training protocols. The idea is to give our personnel additional skills that will help them operate more effectively in challenging environments." Maria leaned forward, intrigued despite her nervousness. "Based on Jake's report, I believe facility maintenance should be a component of that training. Not just basic housekeeping, but advanced techniques for maintaining health, morale, and operational effectiveness through environmental management." "Environmental management?" Maria asked. "That's military terminology for what you do naturally," Stevens explained. "Creating and maintaining physical conditions that support mission objectives. What I'd like to know is whether you'd be interested in helping us develop a formal curriculum for this training." Maria felt her heart racing. "Sir, I'm honored that you'd consider me for something like that, but I don't have any experience developing military training programs." "No, but you have expertise that our current training developers lack. We can teach you the military training structure. What we can't easily teach is the depth of knowledge you have about effective facility maintenance." Stevens opened another file. "Let me show you what we're thinking. This would be a pilot program, initially focused on special operations units deploying to forward operating bases. The training would cover advanced cleaning and maintenance techniques, but more importantly, it would teach personnel to think systematically about their physical environment as a mission support tool." As he outlined the program structure, Maria began to see how her knowledge could fit into a broader military training context. The systematic approach her grandmother had taught her, the attention to detail that came naturally to her, the understanding of how physical environment affected performance. These weren't just cleaning skills. They were operational skills that happened to involve cleaning. "What would my role be exactly?" Maria asked. "Initially, you'd work with our curriculum development team to create training materials and protocols. Once we have the curriculum finalized, you'd help train instructors who could then teach the program to deploying units." "You want me to train military instructors?" "Mrs. Santos, Jake has been a Navy SEAL for 8 years. He's trained with some of the most elite military units in the world. Yesterday, he told me that you taught him things about systematic thinking and attention to detail that no military instructor had ever managed to convey. That tells me you have teaching abilities that we need." Maria sat quietly for a moment, trying to process the magnitude of what was being offered. "Sir, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why is this important enough to create a whole training program? I mean, people have been cleaning things for thousands of years without special military training." Stevens smiled. "That's an excellent question, and it gets to the heart of why this program could be revolutionary. You're right that people have been cleaning for thousands of years, but they've been doing it intuitively without understanding the deeper principles involved." He pulled out a photograph from his desk drawer. "This is from a forward operating base in Afghanistan, Good soldiers, well-trained, highly motivated, but look at their living conditions. The photograph showed what looked like organized chaos. Equipment was scattered around, sleeping areas were cramped and dirty, and everything looked worn down and depressing. "Now look at this," Stevens said, producing another photograph. "This is from a base where the commander had implemented systematic facility maintenance protocols." The second photograph showed the same type of facility, but it looked completely different. Everything was organized, clean, and well-maintained. Even in the harsh environment, there was a sense of order and dignity to the space. The difference in morale, health, and operational effectiveness between these two bases was dramatic. The second base had lower illness rates, better equipment readiness, higher re-enlistment rates, and more successful mission outcomes. Maria studied the photographs. The second base looks like people who care about their work. "Exactly," Stevens said. "What you teach isn't just about cleanliness. It's about maintaining standards, taking pride in your environment, and understanding that small details can have big impacts." "I think I understand," Maria said. "It's like my grandmother used to say, how you do anything is how you do everything." "That's going to be one of the core principles of the program," Stevens said. "Excellence in maintaining your physical environment translates to excellence in maintaining your equipment, your relationships with teammates, and your mission focus." Stevens leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Santos, I need to be honest with you about something. This program is somewhat controversial within the military establishment. Some people think we're overthinking something simple. Others worry that we're wasting training time on housekeeping when we could be focusing on combat skills." "What do you think?" Maria asked. "I think those people are missing the point. In my 22 years of military service, I've seen too many good units degraded by poor living conditions, too many missions complicated by equipment failures that could have been prevented, too many good soldiers who lost their edge because they lost their standards." He gestured to the photographs. "What you understand, what your grandmother taught you, is that physical environment and mental state are connected. A soldier who maintains his living space with pride and attention to detail is more likely to maintain his equipment and his mission focus the same way." Maria nodded slowly. "So this isn't really about cleaning at all." "No, it's about discipline, pride, and systematic thinking. Cleaning just happens to be an excellent way to teach and practice those qualities." "When would this program start?" Maria asked. "That depends partly on you. If you agree to help us develop it, we could have a preliminary curriculum ready in 6 weeks. We'd test it with Jake's team before they deploy, then refine it based on their feedback." Maria thought about Jake and his teammates, about Carlos somewhere in Afghanistan, about all the soldiers who might benefit from what her grandmother had taught her. "Sir, I have one concern." "What's that?" "I don't want to take credit for something that belongs to my grandmother. Everything I know, she taught me. This program should honor her memory." Stevens made a note in his file. "Absolutely. We'll make sure the program acknowledges the source of these techniques and the wisdom behind them." "Then yes, sir, I'd like to help develop this program." "Excellent," Stevens said, extending his hand to shake hers. "Welcome to the team, Mrs. Santos." Over the next 2 hours, Stevens outlined the development process, introduced Maria to the training team she would be working with, and explained the administrative details of her new role. She would be hired as a civilian contractor, with a salary that was nearly double what she made as a janitor. She would keep her base housing and benefits, but her job title would change to Environmental Systems Training Specialist. "One more thing," Stevens said as the meeting was concluding. "This program is going to attract attention. If it's successful, we'll likely get requests from other military units, possibly other branches of service. Are you prepared for that level of visibility?" Maria thought about it carefully. "Sir, if this helps our military personnel do their jobs better and stay safer, then yes, I'm prepared for whatever attention that brings." "Good answer," Stevens said, "because I have a feeling this is going to be bigger than any of us imagine." That evening, Maria called Carlos's mother again to share the news about her new position. Mrs. Santos was thrilled, but also concerned about the pressure her daughter-in-law might face. "This is wonderful, but remember that you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Your grandmother's wisdom is valuable whether other people recognize it or not." "I know, Mama Santos, but if I can help soldiers like Carlos, I have to try." Your grandmother would be so proud. She always said that knowledge was only valuable if you shared it with others. The next morning, Maria reported to her new office in the training development building. Her new workspace was small but comfortable, with a computer, phone, and filing cabinets. What amazed her most was the nameplate on her desk. Maria Santos, Environmental Systems Training Specialist. Her first meeting was with Captain, the officer in charge of curriculum development. Captain was a no-nonsense woman in her 30s with an impressive background in military education. Mrs. Santos, I've reviewed Jake's report on your training session, and I'm excited to work with you on this project. However, I want to be clear about the challenges we're facing. What kind of challenges? Maria asked. First, we need to translate your expertise into a format that can be taught by military instructors to military personnel. That means creating standardized procedures, measurable learning objectives, and practical exercises that work in a classroom environment. I understand. Second, we need to prove that this training actually improves operational outcomes. The military doesn't adopt new programs based on good intentions. We need data showing that personnel who receive this training perform better than those who don't. How do we get that data? That's where Jake's team comes in. They'll be our test case. We'll document their performance before the training, implement the program, then track their effectiveness during deployment. Captain opened a laptop and began showing Maria the framework for military training development. Every military training program follows a specific structure: learning objectives, instructional methods, practical exercises, and assessment criteria. Our job is to take your knowledge and fit it into this framework. Over the next several days, Maria worked intensively with Captain and her team to develop the curriculum. The process was more complex than she had imagined. Every technique she demonstrated had to be broken down into step-by-step procedures. Every principle she explained had to be translated into measurable learning outcomes. Mrs. Santos, Captain said during one of their sessions, you keep saying that the most important thing is developing the right attitude. But how do we teach attitude? Maria thought about her grandmother, about the countless hours she had spent learning not just what to do, but why it mattered. Captain, in my experience, attitude comes from understanding. When people understand why something is important, when they see how it connects to things they already care about, their attitude changes naturally. Can you give me an example? Yesterday, when I was working with Sergeant, he wasn't very interested in learning proper mopping technique. But when I explained how improper floor maintenance in a forward operating base could lead to slip injuries that might compromise a mission, suddenly he was very interested in learning the right way to do it. So we need to connect every technique to mission outcomes. Exactly. People don't care about cleaning for its own sake, but they care about mission success, about taking care of their teammates, about maintaining their equipment. When they understand how facility maintenance supports those goals, they become invested in learning to do it right. This insight became a cornerstone of the curriculum development. Every training module would begin not with techniques, but with clear explanations of how those techniques supported mission objectives and personnel welfare. As the curriculum took shape, Maria found herself learning as much as she was teaching. The military training methodology forced her to think more systematically about her own knowledge, to understand not just what worked, but why it worked. Mrs. Santos, Captain said, after reviewing one of Maria's training outlines, you've created something remarkable here. This isn't just a facility maintenance program. It's a leadership and discipline development program that uses facility maintenance as the vehicle. What do you mean? Look at the skills you're teaching: systematic thinking, attention to detail, quality control, team coordination, resource management, maintaining standards under pressure. These are the same skills we try to develop in our leadership courses. Maria had never thought about it that way, but as she reviewed the curriculum, she could see what Captain meant. Her grandmother's approach to cleaning did involve the same mental disciplines that effective leaders needed. The beauty of this approach, Captain continued, is that it's practical and immediate. Instead of talking about leadership principles in the abstract, you're teaching people to apply them in concrete, measurable ways. My grandmother always said that you couldn't separate how you worked from who you were as a person. That's going to be our program motto, Captain said, making a note. Character is revealed in the details. As the first week of curriculum development concluded, Maria felt both exhausted and exhilarated. She was learning to see her own knowledge in new ways, understanding the broader implications of what her grandmother had taught her. But more than that, she was beginning to believe that this program really could make a difference for military personnel facing challenging deployments. The real test would come the following week, when Jake's team would be the first to experience the complete training program before their deployment. Their feedback would determine whether Maria's unconventional wisdom could be successfully integrated into military culture, and whether a janitor's knowledge could truly help elite soldiers perform their mission more effectively. The training facility was unlike anything Maria had worked in before. Instead of the familiar barracks and offices she was used to cleaning, this was a purpose-built classroom with whiteboards, projectors, and modular furniture designed for hands-on instruction. As she arranged her supplies and prepared for Jake's team to arrive, Maria felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. This wasn't just a demonstration anymore. This was the official pilot test of the Environmental Systems Training Program, and its success or failure would determine whether her grandmother's wisdom would become part of military doctrine or remain a curious experiment. Captain entered the classroom, followed by Lieutenant Commander Stevens and two other officers Maria hadn't met before. "Mrs. Santos, good morning," Stevens said. "I'd like you to meet Colonel Martinez from Special Operations Command and Commander Johnson from the Navy's Training and Doctrine Development Center. They're here to observe today's session." Maria felt her nervousness spike. "Pleasure to meet you both," she managed to say. Colonel Martinez was an imposing figure with silver hair and intense dark eyes. He looked like the kind of military officer who had seen everything and wasn't easily impressed. "Mrs. Santos, I'm here because Lieutenant Commander Stevens made some bold claims about your training program. I'm curious to see if reality matches the paperwork." "I hope you won't be disappointed, sir," Maria said, trying to project more confidence than she felt. "I'm sure I won't be," Commander Johnson added with a friendly smile. "The preliminary reports have been very encouraging." Jake's team arrived precisely on time, filing into the classroom with the quiet professionalism Maria had come to expect from them. But today felt different. They were in full military mode, alert and focused in a way that made Maria acutely aware that these men were about to deploy into a combat zone. "Welcome to the official Environmental Systems Training Program," Captain announced. "Over the next 8 hours, Mrs. Santos will be teaching you advanced facility maintenance techniques specifically designed for forward operating environments. This training is being evaluated for potential integration into pre-deployment protocols for special operations units." Jake caught Maria's eye and gave her an encouraging nod. Having his support made her feel slightly more confident as she stepped to the front of the classroom. "Good morning, everyone," Maria began. "Some of you were here for our informal session last week, but today we're going to be more comprehensive and systematic. By the end of this training, you'll have a complete toolkit of techniques for maintaining your living and working environment in ways that support your mission effectiveness." She gestured to the supplies she had arranged on tables around the room. "But before we get to techniques, I want to talk about why this matters. Colonel Martinez, may I ask you a question?" The colonel looked surprised but nodded. "Go ahead." "In your experience, what's the difference between a unit that performs well under stress and one that doesn't?" "Discipline," Martinez answered immediately. "The ability to maintain standards even when conditions are difficult." "Exactly," Maria said. "And how do you build that kind of discipline?" "Training," said from his seat. "Practicing the right responses until they become automatic." "Right again. What I want to show you today is that facility maintenance, done properly, is discipline training. Every technique I teach you is really about developing the mental habits that make you more effective at everything you do." Maria moved to the whiteboard and wrote 3 words: systems, standards, sustainability. Everything we're going to cover today falls into one of these 3 categories. Systems are about developing efficient, repeatable processes. Standards are about defining what good enough means and refusing to accept less. Sustainability is about maintaining performance over extended periods without burning out. Commander Johnson leaned forward in his seat. "Mrs. Santos, can you give us a concrete example of how these concepts apply in a deployment situation?" "Of course," Maria said. "Let's talk about weapon maintenance. You all clean your weapons systematically, right? Same process every time, same level of thoroughness, whether you're tired or alert, whether you've been in combat or on routine patrol. The SEALs nodded. That's because you understand that weapon reliability could save your life. What I want you to understand is that the same principles apply to your living environment. A systematically maintained sleeping area leads to better rest. Better rest leads to better decision-making. Better decision-making can save lives. Jake raised his hand. Ma'am, can you show us what that looks like in practice? Absolutely, Maria said. But first, let's establish our baseline. Jake, can you and your team set up a typical sleeping area using the equipment we've provided? One corner of the classroom had been arranged with military cots, footlockers, and personal equipment similar to what the team would encounter in Afghanistan. The SEALs quickly arranged their gear in a configuration that looked functional but unremarkable. Good, Maria said. Now, Colonel Martinez, from a military perspective, how does this setup look to you? Martinez examined their work critically. Adequate. Everything is secure, personal items are properly stowed, weapons are positioned for quick access. Standard field configuration. Perfect, Maria said. Now let me show you how we can improve on adequate using systematic environmental management. Over the next hour, Maria guided the team through a complete transformation of their sleeping area. She showed them how to arrange equipment for maximum efficiency, how to create designated spaces for different activities, how to establish routines that would maintain organization even under stress. The key, she explained as they worked, is understanding that your physical environment affects your mental state. When your space is chaotic, your thinking becomes chaotic. When your space is organized, your thinking becomes clearer. Looked up from arranging his medical kit. Ma'am, this is like what we learned about tactical organization, but applied to living space instead of combat operations. Exactly, Maria said. The principles are the same. Everything has a designated place, everything is arranged for maximum efficiency, and everything is maintained at the highest possible standard. Williams was organizing his communications equipment using Maria's techniques. This is actually faster than my usual setup, he said with surprise, and I can find everything without thinking about it. That's the goal, Maria said. When your basic living functions are systematized, you free up mental energy for more important tasks. Colonel Martinez had been watching silently, but now he stepped forward to examine the transformed sleeping area more closely. Mrs. Santos, this level of organization is impressive, but how do you maintain it under field conditions, when personnel are exhausted, stressed, operating on minimal sleep? That's where sustainability comes in, sir, Maria said. The systems have to be designed so that maintaining them requires minimal conscious effort. She demonstrated how each organizational system was designed to be maintained through simple, automatic actions. Equipment was arranged so that using it properly automatically returned it to its designated place. Cleaning supplies were positioned so that quick maintenance became natural and effortless. The goal is to make the right choice the easy choice, Maria explained. When people are exhausted, they'll take the path of least resistance. Our job is to design systems where the path of least resistance leads to maintaining standards rather than letting them slide. Commander Johnson was taking detailed notes. Mrs. Santos, this is remarkably sophisticated. Have you studied organizational psychology? No, sir, just practical experience. But my grandmother always said that if you wanted people to do something consistently, you had to make it easier to do it right than to do it wrong. For the next several hours, Maria walked the team through comprehensive facility maintenance protocols. But unlike traditional training, every technique was connected to operational outcomes and psychological principles. When she taught them advanced cleaning techniques, she explained how cleanliness prevented illness and equipment failure. When she showed them organizational systems, she demonstrated how organization reduced decision fatigue and cognitive load. When she covered inspection and quality control procedures, she connected them to the discipline and attention to detail required for mission success. Mrs. Santos, Jackson said during a break, this is the most useful training I've received in years. Why isn't this standard for all military units? Because most people think of cleaning as separate from military operations, Maria replied. What we're learning is that they're not separate at all. Environmental management is force multiplier. During the practical exercises, The observing officers rotated through the different stations, watching the SEALs apply Maria's techniques and asking detailed questions about implementation challenges. Sergeant, Colonel Martinez asked during one exercise, how difficult would it be to implement these protocols with a larger unit, say a platoon-sized element? Sir, the techniques scale well, replied. The key insight is that individual discipline creates unit discipline. If every soldier maintains his personal area to these standards, the entire unit benefits. What about enforcement? Martinez pressed. How do you ensure compliance when leadership isn't present? That's the beauty of this approach, sir, said. When everyone understands how their individual actions affect team performance, enforcement becomes less necessary. People maintain standards because they see the benefits, not because they're afraid of punishment. Maria watched this exchange with growing confidence. The SEALs weren't just learning her techniques. They were internalizing the principles and thinking about how to adapt them to different situations. As the day progressed, the observing officers became increasingly engaged. Commander Johnson began asking about curriculum development and instructor training requirements. Colonel Martinez wanted to understand resource needs and implementation timelines. Mrs. Santos, Stevens said during the final exercise, Colonel Martinez has a question for you. Martinez stepped forward. Mrs. Santos, I've been in the military for 26 years. I've seen countless training programs come and go. Most of them promise revolutionary improvements but deliver marginal results at best. Maria felt her heart sink, wondering if he was about to dismiss everything they had accomplished. However, Martinez continued, what I've seen today is different. This isn't just training, it's a fundamental shift in how we think about the relationship between individual discipline and unit effectiveness. He paused, looking around the transformed classroom. The question is, are you prepared for what comes next? If we implement this program, it won't just be one SEAL team. It could be hundreds of units, thousands of personnel. Are you ready for that responsibility? Maria thought about Carlos, somewhere in Afghanistan. She thought about Jake and his team preparing to deploy into danger. She thought about her grandmother who had taught her that honest work done well was its own reward. Sir, she said quietly, if this training can help our military personnel be more effective and come home safer, then yes, I'm ready for that responsibility. Martinez smiled for the first time all day. Mrs. Santos, I'm recommending immediate implementation of this program for all special operations units. Furthermore, I want you to know that you've changed how I think about training and discipline. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, Martinez said, because I'm also recommending that you be promoted to senior training specialist and assigned to develop similar programs for other aspects of military operations. Your approach to systematic thinking and individual excellence has applications far beyond facility maintenance. As the formal training session concluded, Jake approached Maria privately. Ma'am, I want you to know that what you've taught us is going to save lives, he said seriously. Not just because of the specific techniques, but because of how you've helped us think about excellence and discipline. Thank you, Jake. That means everything to me. There's something else, Jake said. We've been assigned to a forward operating base where your husband's unit is also deployed. If you want, I can deliver a message when we get there. Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes. Would you tell him that I'm proud of him, and that I'm using my grandmother's teachings to help soldiers like him stay safe and effective? I'd be honored to deliver that message, Jake said. That evening, as Maria packed up her supplies and prepared to leave the training facility, she reflected on how much her life had changed in just 2 weeks. She had gone from being an anonymous janitor to developing military training programs, from cleaning barracks to teaching Navy SEALs, from feeling like her work didn't matter to knowing that it could make a difference in life-and-death situations. But more than that, she had learned that her grandmother's wisdom was more profound than she had ever realized. The lessons about respect, attention to detail, and systematic thinking weren't just about cleaning. They were about character, discipline, and excellence in all aspects of life. As she walked to her car, Maria looked back at the base where she had worked for nearly 2 years. Tomorrow, she would return as Senior Training Specialist Maria Santos, responsible for developing programs that could affect thousands of military personnel. It was a daunting prospect, but she felt ready for the challenge. After all, as her grandmother had always said, How you do anything is how you do everything. And Maria was determined to do everything with the same care, attention, and respect that her grandmother had taught her to bring to a simple mop and bucket. 6 months later, Maria stood in the Pentagon briefing room, looking out at an audience of senior military officials from all branches of the armed services. The room was filled with colonels, generals, and Navy captains, all there to hear about the results of the Environmental Systems Training Program pilot. The woman who had once felt intimidated by a single Navy SEAL now commanded the attention of some of the highest-ranking officers in the military. "Ladies and," announced General Hayes, Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, "we're here today to review the results of an innovative training program that has exceeded all expectations. Senior Training Specialist Maria Santos will present the findings." Maria stepped to the podium, wearing her new civilian contractor uniform with pride. The nameplate on her jacket read, M. Santos, Senior Training Specialist, Environmental Systems Division. It still felt surreal sometimes, but she had earned her place in this room through results that spoke for themselves. "Thank you, General Hayes," Maria began, her voice clear and confident. 6 months ago, we implemented the Environmental Systems Training Program with Navy SEAL Team 7 before their deployment to Afghanistan. Today, I'm here to share the remarkable outcomes of that deployment and announce the expansion of this program throughout Special Operations Command. She clicked to the first slide of her presentation, showing photographs of the forward operating base where Jake's team had been deployed. These images were taken at FOB Chapman, where Team 7 has been operating for the past 6 months. As you can see, their living and working areas maintain a level of organization and cleanliness that far exceeds typical field conditions. The photographs were striking. Despite the harsh desert environment and constant operational tempo, the SEAL Team's area looked like a model installation. Equipment was perfectly organized, sleeping areas were clean and well-maintained, and common spaces reflected the same attention to detail that Maria had taught them in SAN. "But the real story isn't in the photographs," Maria continued. "It's in the performance metrics." The next slide showed comparative data that had impressed everyone who reviewed it. Team 7 experienced 0 illness-related mission delays during their deployment, compared to an average of 2.3 delays for similar units. Their equipment readiness rate was 98.7%, compared to a theater average of 91.4%. Most significantly, their mission success rate was 100%, with secondary objectives completed in 89% of operations. Admiral Richardson, the Special Operations Commander, leaned forward in his seat. "Mrs. Santos, those are exceptional numbers, but how do we know the training program was the determining factor?" "Excellent question, sir," Maria replied. "We implemented comprehensive data collection protocols to isolate the variables. Team 7 operated in the same environment, with the same mission parameters, and faced the same challenges as other units in the theater. The primary difference was their application of environmental systems training protocols." She clicked to the next slide, which showed detailed breakdowns of how the training had affected different aspects of their deployment. Team Leader Petty Officer reported that the systematic approach to facility maintenance had broader effects on team discipline and morale. Quote, "The habits we developed for maintaining our living space carried over into every aspect of our operations. When you maintain excellence in small things, excellence in big things follows naturally." General Martinez, who had been skeptical 6 months earlier, nodded approvingly. "Mrs. Santos, I was present for the original training session. At the time, I thought this might be a useful addition to our protocols. I didn't anticipate it would become a force multiplier of this magnitude." "Neither did I, sir," Maria admitted. "But the results speak for themselves. The training affected not just facility maintenance, but leadership development, team cohesion, and operational discipline." Commander Johnson raised his hand. "Mrs. Santos, what kind of feedback did you receive from the team members themselves?" "I'm glad you asked, sir," Maria said, clicking to a slide filled with quotes from the deployed SEALs. Sergeant wrote, "This training changed how I think about leadership. Instead of just telling my men to maintain standards, I could show them exactly how and why," Petty Officer reported. "The systematic approach to organization reduced decision fatigue and allowed me to focus more mental energy on mission-critical tasks." She paused at one particular quote from Williams. "Mrs. Santos taught us that excellence is a habit, not an event. That philosophy became central to how we approached every aspect of our deployment. The most significant feedback came from Petty Officer, Maria continued. He wrote, "The environmental systems training didn't just make us better at cleaning, it made us better SEALs." The room was quiet for a moment as the assembled officers absorbed the implications of what they were hearing. Finally, General Hayes spoke up. "Mrs. Santos, based on these results, what recommendations are you making for program expansion?" "General, we're proposing immediate implementation for all Special Operations units, with a phased rollout to conventional forces beginning next quarter. We've already begun training instructor cadres at Fort, Camp, and MacDill Air Force Base." She clicked to a slide showing the expansion timeline. "Within 18 months, we project that every deploying unit will have at least one environmental systems training graduate. Our goal is to fundamentally change how the military thinks about the relationship between individual discipline and unit effectiveness." Admiral Richardson asked, "What about resource requirements? This level of expansion will require significant investment in training infrastructure and personnel." "Sir, the return on investment has been exceptional," Maria replied. "The cost of training Team 7 was approximately $12,000. The operational benefits they achieved during deployment have been valued at over $2.3 million in terms of mission success, reduced equipment replacement costs, and decreased medical expenses." General Martinez whistled quietly. "That's nearly a 200-to-1 return on investment." "Yes, sir, and that calculation doesn't include the intangible benefits: improved morale, enhanced unit cohesion, and the development of leadership skills that personnel will carry throughout their careers." As Maria concluded her presentation, the questions from the assembled officers became increasingly focused on implementation details rather than whether the program should be expanded. It was clear that the Environmental Systems Training Program had proven itself beyond any doubt. After the briefing, Maria was approached by General Hayes. "Mrs. Santos, I want to personally congratulate you on what you've accomplished here. In my 30 years of military service, I've rarely seen a training innovation have this kind of immediate and measurable impact." "Thank you, General. I'm honored to have contributed to our military's effectiveness." "There's something else I want to discuss with you," Hayes said. "We've been authorized to create a new position, Director of Environmental Systems Training, responsible for overseeing the program's expansion throughout the Department of Defense. We'd like to offer that position to you." Maria felt her breath catch. "General, I'm deeply honored, but I want to make sure I understand what that would involve." "You'd be responsible for training development, instructor certification, and quality control for environmental systems training across all branches of the military. You'd have a staff of 12 and an annual budget of $4.8 million. More importantly, you'd be shaping how hundreds of thousands of service members approach their professional development." As Maria considered the offer, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jake, who was still deployed in Afghanistan. "Maria, just delivered your message to S. Santos. He asked me to tell you that he's proud of the difference you're making and can't wait to see you when he gets home." Reading that message, Maria felt all the pieces of her life coming together. Her husband was safe and proud of her work. Her grandmother's wisdom was helping soldiers around the world, and she was being offered the opportunity to expand that impact even further. "General Hayes," she said, "I accept the position, but I have one request." "What's that?" "I'd like the Environmental Systems Training Manual to be dedicated to my grandmother, Santos.